Okay, I'm going to share my screen just to give everybody an idea of what the show looks like on screen. Um, okay, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to our June 2021 solo show Artist Talk featuring Abol Bahadori. We'll be showing his work tonight, and he'll be talking about his exhibit perspectives and his process for his artwork. First, I want to show a short video.
My name is Abol Bahadori. I was born in Tabriz, the largest city of southern Azerbaijan, which is part of Iran. Historically, Tabriz was a significant hub on the Silk Road. It is a city of carpets, miniatures, and mosaics. I left my place of birth at a very young age, but I still believe that is where my passion for colors come from. I went to art school in England, got my bachelor's in textile design, and my master's in computer graphics from the University of Manchester in England. I started my graphic design firm after graduation over there and moved to the US soon after. Meanwhile, I've also been painting pretty much all my life. Most of my artwork is created here in Northern Virginia and DC, as I've now lived most of my life here. I consider myself predominantly a colorist, and I segment the artboard to accommodate my colors. In the perspective series here on display, I use various perspective grids to do just that. This series is very much inspired by the rediscovery of perspective during the Renaissance period. My paintings up until now have been abstract expressions with color playing a major role. Rather than adding realistic depth to abstraction, I wanted to use the segments of the 3D grid to hold the color. The very first painting in this series I did in 2018, which is called Entrance, and it is here on display. Entrance was truly a door for me to step into a rather surreal world. Now some of the gestural abstract marks started looking like human or animal figures simply because I had added a perspective grid. Later on, instead of avoiding these odd figures, I made them more realistic. This literally changed my own perspective in making art. For the first time, I started taking advantage of my graphic design and illustration skills simply because it was easier for me to plot various perspective grids on the computer first. This led to sometimes starting the whole thing digitally and then painting over it. And other times, I created the figures digitally for collage on canvas. I still rely a lot on my intuitive mark making when it comes to details. The process and media differ from painting to painting as I shift from white to black backgrounds. I let the personality of the work also lead me. I always leave some gaps to be filled by the imagination of the viewers. The narrative belongs to the viewer.
Welcome, Abol.
Thank you so much. That was great. I hadn't seen the video before. You did a great job. I had simply put the voiceover. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Art League now is providing a lot more than just a show with these videos and interviews. It's really a great opportunity to be here and meet all of you guys. I would like to also share my screen and talk a little bit more about what you already heard in the video. So yes, for me, art means stepping into a different reality or a different point of view. And I think this applies to all sorts of styles, from abstract to representational, paintings, and even photography. The two-dimensional surface is a window, and it is an artist's job to provide an to provide an altered vision through that window. Even if it is not altered, even if the reality is not altered, the fact that it is a window it itself makes it different than how we see reality. I'm a little bit of a science geek too, and I always think about the fact that we view the world using our eyes with a limited color spectrum and field of vision. But what if we had compound eyes like insects, sonar capabilities like dolphins, or even use other unknown senses to receive our vision? My paintings are imaginary simulation of alternative visions. They attempt to visualize the world through a prism or kaleidoscope of broken objects. And in this series currently on display, it is the perspective grid or simulations of depth that breaks up the image. The grid as a new third dimension also symbolizes an additional sensorium on the two-dimensional surface. It holds the picture together loosely as a wireframe in the background or in front. Colors play a big role for me. Before we delve into the paintings in this current exhibit, I would like to give a brief background about what I was doing before this series and what led me to this series. So I consider myself a colorist, and to accommodate my color palettes, I generally segment my artboards in different ways in each series I create. Here are examples from my previous series. As you can see, I have used many different geometrical and organic ways of dividing the surface, but I'm always looking for new ways. The two paintings on the left are from my music series, where I divided the canvas with vertical stripes to accommodate a wide range of colors. Then in my fractured series, the painting on the right-hand side is from my fractured series, and I had already started dividing the artboard into triangles and trapezoids. And this had already started looking like some depth, but depth was not really what I was looking for. Meanwhile, I was really interested throughout my life I'm very curious about what happened in the Renaissance period when artists started using the Cartesian coordinates. It came from East, it came from Middle East, and through the wars with Christian and Muslims, Crusades, Eastern culture and science got absorbed into Europe. And Europe started using mathematics in all sorts of arts. Here, Da Vinci has used a 1-point grid. Of course, the perspective grid was used as a measuring tool only, and it got covered up by paint and erased completely. I was interested in using the grid as a different tool. I wanted to use it to segment the surface rather than simulate depth and hide it. but the inevitable simulation of depth started pushing the paintings towards a more surreal look. Because as soon as you introduce an element from reality, and that is depth, you're not talking about pure abstract anymore. So as much as I was intrigued with it, uh, in turn, it encouraged me to add more realistic illustrations to further trigger the sense of reality. So I was already starting to work as a surreal artist than just purely abstract. To that end, I've come up with different processes and types of media. Sometimes I started with drawing the grid first, eliminating some of it with paint later. And sometimes I have actually showing through, using the grid to show through what is behind. In some cases, I have actually used the shapes that grid itself created as solid objects of the surface. It's a nice play for a colorist like myself, because I can show the solid color, and then I can show um, all the marks, all the intuitive marks, using that color in combination with another color. And sometimes I've added it later. I've added the perspective objects much later. This was a painting that I did in Beverly Ryan's class from a nude model. And as she was moving around, this was a very spontaneous sketch with brush, really. And what you see on the right-hand side is when I introduced the lines later. And it just really moved the painting. I mean, it just combined those objects, those models, those figures. It combined and united them in a very nice way. In this particular painting, I have not used any digital art whatsoever. And sometimes a lot of times, actually, I have indeed done my studies on paper first. It definitely helps. I've then redrawn it on canvas, and results are always different because much gets added later on. Having said that, I typically don't study. I don't typically sketch and then decide what's going to be on the canvas. In this painting, I have used some aspects of music series, dividing the canvas with vertical stripes, but the three-dimensionality is introduced by the middle figure's left hand sliding or closing the door. I call this painting closure, and I leave the interpretation or the narrative to the viewer. I really don't want to attach a lengthy story to any of my paintings. The left right panel has the architectural perspective beams. I had, at this stage, was not introducing the grid to the entire painting. And when it comes to the full grid structure itself, I have created most of the grids on computer first. It's just easier. My other job is graphic design. So the digital apps like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop I use came handy. But in fact, it was the first time in this series that I was utilizing my digital skills for painting. I had kept my fine arts separate from graphic design most of the time, because I was under the assumption for the longest time that it will spoil my intuitive process. I can tell you, I couldn't be more wrong. I mean, really, that was really in my mind, and it was just totally BS. It's the opposite, because the possibilities for generating spontaneous work doubles or quadruples when you're working both manually and digitally. There's a lot of intuitive editing that happens on computer too. Anybody using tablets for a tool for painting, then they know that. In fact, it speeds it up. And the final execution on canvas always generates surprises. Often, and not always, I took pictures of the painting throughout the process and added or subtracted various elements on computer first. So what you see on the left-hand side is just the canvas. Halfway through the painting, I have drawn my lines for perspective grid, and I have used stained tissue paper. I've collaged stained tissue paper on top of it. I think at this stage it did not have any acrylic paint. On the right-hand side, I brought it to the computer and I've added these figures, and I was experimenting with these digital shapes that I had created too. And at the end, of course, the painting itself tells you what it wants to become. I've eliminated a lot of what I had here and added more. And obviously the figures are generated digitally and then painted on the canvas. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about media too. Halfway through this series, I discovered spray paint, and that is acrylic spray paint, mostly Montana brand. It was just the most perfect medium I was looking for. It softened the edges and created more solid edges at the same time. It's also perfect for masking and stenciling. Then I discovered Golden brand's acrylic medium called Pastel Ground, which dries transparent and provides almost a fine sandpaper surface. So you can then use pastel or watercolor on top of everything else. This painting is on a wood board. So the figure that I actually created digitally from a photograph, I then collaged it onto the wood piece. I sanded it off. I sanded off the bottom part of his body. And I just love doing stuff like that too, and not just rely on digital skills. In this one, I call this painting Temple of Love. This is the close-up of it. I have painted with acrylic paint and markers as well as dry pastel over a digital collage. It took me a while to find the best fixative for pastel too. I had to fix it because I'm not putting the large canvas behind the glass. It's an Australian brand called Crystal Coat, and Coat is spelled with K. I love that stuff, even though it's poisonous. I work outdoor. Here in this painting, I created the perspective beams digitally. I was getting tired of the digital grid, so I decided to use something different with same 3D characteristics. Then I have drawn it with a ruler on the canvas and started painting. There were many additional stages back and forth from digital to manual, many more stages than you see, the 3 stages from painting to painting. And I've experimented with different ideas of back and forth, illuminating, adding. The figures I added at the end. Most of the time, figures get added at the end. Sometimes I've distorted the grid itself. So as you can see in the close-up of this painting called Ascending, as you go further away from the square in the middle,
the triangles and trapezoids generated by the grid get distorted and fly away from the center. I really enjoy doing that. I really enjoy breaking what is solid, what is you know, pretty defined. And this is the larger scale of the same painting. There's only a reminiscent of the perspective grid remaining in this painting versus how solid and dominant it is in other paintings like this one. And this one, again, from painting to painting, I was to not to get bored really repeating the same thing. That's my biggest issue. Every new painting is a new experiment for me. So I've done the whole painting with tiling and building the mosaic like a jigsaw puzzle. Here, some of the tiles are done digitally, printed and collaged next to a painted or sprayed area on the canvas itself. And yet I've painted some of the tiles on paper and attached it later. So some of the white lines that you see in the middle are actually bare canvas, because it's very difficult to tile on canvas. Canvas is really not flat. You push it and it goes deeper. So I couldn't meet those the tiles, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna leave it alone. I just thought it's a cool effect and didn't fill them up. I feel it adds movement. One thing I'm against, but I can't even work like that is to be to make everything perfect. As much as I'm a perfectionist in my graphic design, I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to painting. I think it contradicts the concept of art to be a perfectionist. That is it. That is it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. I didn't want anything to interrupt your great presentation. Thank you so much. When we spoke the other day, I asked you what you were currently working on, and you said that you work on more than one series at a time. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, you can see two of them behind me. This is actually a photo of my studio. I'm actually not sitting there, but I always have at least two series going on at the same time. And right now, I'm doing the solid geometrical divides. I don't have a paint name for it, but it's probably just something like color fields. This color field, let's call it color field series. I have the color field series going on, and at the same time, I have more paintings with the perspective series, and it helps because sometimes they merge together. So a lot of new series get born from they get born out of doing two different series, and at some stage you merge them together.
I am sharing in the chat your website, the gallery page on your website, if anyone wants to check out more of your series. Talk a little bit about how you first came up. Well, you talked about how you came up with the idea of this exhibit. Did what you proposed 2 years ago when you had to submit, your proposal for this exhibit, has anything changed in terms of the final product?
No, not at all. In fact, it's kind of like grounded it more. But Julia, you're not sharing anything. I thought you said you're sharing.
Oh, I am. I just wanted to ask a few of those questions first.
Sure. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yes, the proposal I submitted was pretty much what I read to you. Distortion of reality, using a component of reality that is the perspective grid.
Yeah.
It got more and more established in a sense, because from painting to painting, I was realizing that, I can bend it in different ways, and I can do whatever I want to that grid, that element of reality, and it gives different results every time. And yet they were all, it was the common element among all of them. So no, I did not eliminate anything from what I had proposed to do in the proposal. And in fact, if anything, I added more figures, because it was just, asking for it. But I submitted the paintings that I submitted to, three of the paintings that I submitted for the proposal actually got sold. But I created more, I had no issues with bringing these paintings to the show without having a negotiation with Art League that, hey, this is not exactly what I proposed. It can happen. I mean, I can see that happen too.
Well, now I will share my screen to look at 5 specific works of yours. Dragonflies is the first one. Talk about your inspiration for dragonflies.
Yes, like I said, I'm a science history, natural history geek. There was this period in planet Earth's history. It's called Carbonifera period. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Where the oxygen level was really high in the atmosphere, and we had this humongous dragonflies. So when I started this painting, that was not the plan. I was not planning to create a picture of that ancient era of Earth's history. But what I was doing was, I had a stained paper with a bleeding tissue paper. I had gotten these pieces of paper that I simply stuck on the canvas, kind of randomly. And that this was after I had drawn the lines. And then I started painting, spraying. I realized that the bottom part is looking like a pond or antiquity era of history of planet Earth. And it was like, oh my God, this is looking like Carbonifera area, period. And I just had to add the dragonflies. So that's how it happened.
Okay. Salutations.
Yes, this is about really sun worship. Every tradition of human history from all around the world, they had these equinox air periods where the tribes gathered, and all these shamanistic ancient religions believe that something miraculous happens at the turn of the solace, and it's usually first day of the spring. We celebrate Nowruz in Iran, Azerbaijan, entire Middle East. Not all of Middle East, but most of Middle East celebrate Nowruz, which is the first day of the spring. This was actually at that time, and I was thinking that I could do something about sun worship or equinox. And that is why I have that sun in the middle. So there was some narrative behind this one, to be honest. It wasn't completely accidental. And I called it Salutations.
Skylight Dream.
Yes, this is a more experimental. I definitely did not plan anything in advance. I was trying to put more, instead of having that rigid, repetitive perspective grid that is a 1 point grid, I was introducing different grids. And in fact, the front of it, where it looks like hills, it had a tile, like warped and wrapped around tiles. And it got too busy. And I sanded it off. Then I had this strange shapes created by completely accidentally, well, not 100% accidentally, but I'd cut the paper and I cut the tissue paper, colored tissue paper, and I laid it on top of white tissue paper, and then I sprayed with water. Water goes down and creates these very strange shapes, almost out of this world, completely fantasy-like shapes, and that little cactus in the middle was one of them, the hills themselves. So I put it together, and then I was looking for a figure, and I was looking for a ballerine. And Suhaila, my friend Suhaila, who's actually on this call, she sent me this picture, and I digitized that guy, the ballerine, and I put I changed the colors and completely turned him to something else than his natural skin colors, etc. And I cut it and I stuck it on top. The sky that you see on the top is actually a photograph I took of the sky. That's collage too. It was a very difficult painting because I wanted to spray it around that cactus. So all the orange and brown parts that you see were added by spray paint later. So I had to make stencils and cut it carefully around it.
Oh.
So this had its own completely different process than any other painting.
I noticed that several of the figures you choose for your artwork are people in motion, dancing, diving. Why do you choose that type of movement? Why do you choose that?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Well, thank you for asking. It's the drama, right? It's the drama. It's the theatrical. It's a theatrical. I think that this effect that the grid gives inevitably is dramatic, and I only add what it is just asking for, and it's usually asking for more drama.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the best way I can explain it. And of course, motion makes it dynamic.
Right. Motion. Levitation.
This was one of the early ones. It is very spontaneous. There is apart from the lines, and of course, painted by number, in halfway painted by number effects. This was a very spontaneous painting. I had the lines on the canvas and I completely ignored them. And initially I just was painting as I always paint, without limitations, but with masking, some not masking. And I added the figure at the end again, because I wanted to, the figure is doing a different job here, really. It is tilting the dimension. It's tilting the perspective itself, because if he was really standing on this, he wouldn't have looked like that. By him standing in that odd angle, it's making us think that the floor is moving, or the same with the curve. So I've tried to break it up where possible to make it more interesting, to intrigue the viewer, for them to have their own imagination walk into the canvas. and both that curvature and the figure that is the job they do.
Shattered.
Yes, this was a study actually for another painting. This had a lot of back and forth between digital and hands-on. The shattered image you see at the bottom is I created that digitally. The sky was a picture, a photograph I took, and I combined them digitally first, and then I started doing all sorts of sprays and masking. It's a small painting. I believe it's 12 by 12, but it's a study for another painting, which is also in this show.
And that's the last image. What are the sizes of your paintings? What is the largest piece you have in?
Yes, the largest piece and most of the pieces I have are 36 by 48 inches. I love to do bigger than that, but they won't fit in my car. Maybe one day I buy a bigger car and I do that.
There's a comment from Amy Hans. She thinks your work is outstanding and you are a true visionary. She also says, thank you, agreed, virtual work and multimedia artists are valid. I am also a graphic designer by degree, and the creativity can double, as you say, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and I thank you for emphasizing that. This was an internal struggle I was dealing with, because when I do digital work on computer and I stick it on canvas, for the longest time I thought I was cheating. But you look at what all the very well-known artists are doing nowadays, you realize that everything is just a tool. And if you can come up with the vision or imagine the vision, then you should not put any limit as so far as media is concerned, that say, oh, I'm only doing oil and I'm only doing acrylic. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it was limiting my capabilities.
Claudia Capel asked, are you going to continue your surrealistic perspective series?
I think I'm going to continue it a little bit. In fact, I think it was Claudia who introduced me to several other artists that I didn't know, and their works were so inspiring. And I'm not going to remember their names right now, but I've seen artists do simply introduce three-dimensional objects into abstract painting, that the objects themselves are abstract, but they look three-dimensional. And I think that's the direction I want to move this. But I have to make a lot of models the same way that I made rulers and the grids. I actually feel like I have to do a little bit more study before I just jump and say, this is it. This is my new series.
Susan Antoinette says, love your work. Question, on Skylight Dreams, you said the few tiles that are clouds are photos. Do you literally collage the photo or paint from the photo?
No, it's literally collaged photo. It is just, I just cut the photo and stuck it there. And I put a lot of UV light protection to make sure that it won't fade. And that's exactly my point. I don't feel like you have to cover it with paint. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's nice to reveal a photographic quality when you think that it's intriguing and it's making your art interesting. That is not, to me, that is not reducing the value of your art by any means.
Mark Rubin commented, truly impressed with your work, very powerful and inspiring.
Thank you.
Can you talk more about the giant baby? It's very apocalyptic.
Yes, thank you for asking that. I was hoping that somebody will ask that. It was what came out of COVID for me. It was the background that I did. It looked like end of the world, but it was really like what came out of my feelings. It was just, I was simply pouring my feelings onto it, and it was just at this most stagnating period in the COVID era. And I thought, like, this is, I have to add a baby or something new, something that is born again, something that is born right now, to make this a more not just end of the world. So there is that contrast in there, I hope. And some people, Robin actually told me on Sunday, we went there together, another artist lady who was in our Beverly class, she said, that baby scares me. I was like, well, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's, I usually don't like putting things that are disgusting or repulsive, but that was my whole intention. It could look like the beginning or the end.
Yeah, it looked hopeful to me.
Good. And that's good too.
Beverly says, great work, Abul. Seeing your work in person today at the gallery was a wonderful experience. In addition to your visionary concepts, I was extremely impressed by your details, use of color, and multiple layers. And speaking of color, Karen Schmidt says, is that your studio in the background? You have a very unique color palette, fresh and mod.
Yes, it is. And it is, I'm not sitting there, that's just a picture.
But that is your studio. Claudia says you're giving away your secrets.
Well, it comes to a point that I've learned from other artists, and we were talking about this a little earlier today,
Right.
Julia. It is the community that I'm learning this from. By the way, I want to really thank 3 of our teachers at the Art League. So you learn from them, you need to give back. That's what I believe. One of the teachers, Sharon Robinson, I took 2 of her classes, one in the Smithsonian. It was called Paper Frenzy. Again, thanks to Claudia. She found out about it, and we went there together. It was just wonderful. It was just, the way that I'm staining paper and then staining tissue paper and sticking it on top. I would have never done that. So a lot of these effects are from that class. Many thanks to Sharon Robinson. I'm going to take more classes from her. And my many thanks goes to Beverly Ryan, whose classes I take constantly, frequently. I hope we will see her back again. She's going through recovery from health issues, and I hope that she will be back soon. The other teacher, I've only taken 1 class from her, but that was plenty to kind of open my eyes, and that's Lisa Semarang. And it was not even a hands-on class. Lisa Semarang's class was just theoretical class. And as a graphic designer, it would have probably been the last thing I wanted to take, because the top of the title of the class is design. And you would think that you know everything. I've gone to university, I've got a master's degree on design, but it is very different to see what design means for paintings. The composition. It's completely opposite of graphic design. You have to make sure that everything is not symmetrical, or it will be boring. But one thing that I learned from Lisa's classes is the importance of line. That was actually a trigger to start this serious. You know, the lines and importance of outlines. In graphic design, we eliminate outlines. It's horrible to have outlines on letters and everything. In painting, outlines do a different job. And in reality, they don't exist. But it works. For somehow it attracts human eyes.
Sharon asked, why do you like the pastel medium so much?
Oh my God, it's everything that I can't do with acrylic. Everything that I cannot do with acrylic. I've seen people and very talented artists who use acrylic to that end, and you know, you have to really get close to know that, or you never know that this is not oil or this is not pastel. Just you know, using your fingers and on canvas surface, blending it is not something that I am able to do with acrylic.
What you told me that you create art every day. So is that, do you plan it the night before? Do you just get up and do it intuitively?
Well, let me clarify that. And I think and I read the article you wrote. In fact, what I said was that I create something every day. Not all of it is painting, because I'm a graphic designer too. So every day I'm doing some creative work. I would say 75% of it is graphic design, because that's how I make money. I don't live on my paintings. In fact, I don't want my paintings to be my source of income. It would be commercialized. I don't know if that's even possible to start with. But yes, I do paint at least, I do painting at least once a week. My weekends are painting time. Some days I find time to paint every day. Some weeks I find time to paint every day. Some weeks I don't find time to paint every day. I don't plan anything ahead of time whatsoever when it comes to paintings. I really don't. I usually have some splash, some stuff of stock on the painting, some collage, some really intuitive paint pouring, and then I think what this wants to become.
What has this period of pandemic been like for you creatively?
It was very suffocating, and at the same time, it was very liberating. It was suffocating because obviously everywhere was closed. You don't get out. I don't socialize that much now that I'm older, but nevertheless, just knowing that you can't meet your loved ones every day was tough, and obviously not being able to go to galleries, exchange ideas, absorb of other artists' paintings into your subconscious. But at the same time, it was very liberating because there was nothing else I could do but paint.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I had all this free time in my hand. And from that point of view, it was very liberating.
Abol, what's next for you?
I don't know. I'm probably going to go to hibernation for a while after this show. That's usually how it happens with solo shows. You don't want to do anything for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. But I was telling my partner Dixon yesterday that, you know, I have to paint, and then luckily there's somebody else at home who's an artist, so we exchange. So he passed me something that he had started and he didn't know where to go. So I did some painting yesterday.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, which enhanced the Artist Talk. Thank you all for participating, and come into the gallery and see Perspectives. It's up until July 3rd.
Most of the people on this panel who have joined this event I know, and I have learned something from every single one of them, I should say. And I really want to thank you all, and this opportunity, Julia, you gave. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.